You've seen the weird lines in the sky, right? You've probably heard the theories. Is someone out there actually controlling the weather? For years, that question's been relegated to the fringes, to late-night radio shows and deep-dive internet forums. But what if it wasn't just a theory? What if there was something real happening? Okay, let's get into it.
Now this is from a real letter someone sent to a weather modification company. And you gotta love it, right? It's bizarre, it's kind of funny, but it also takes this whole idea out of the realm of abstract conspiracy and slams it right into our very weird reality. Because here's the real twist in this story. The cutting edge of weather control today, it's not happening in some secret government bunker. Nope. It's happening in a warehouse in California, it's backed by venture capital, and it's being run by a 25-year-old. This is the story of Rainmaker.
To really get what Rainmaker is doing, we have to clear the air, literally, because the online conversation is just dominated by one thing: chemtrails. But the reality is a lot more specific, and we really need to separate the actual science from all the speculation.
It is so important we get our terms straight here, because these three things get mashed together all the time, but they're completely different. You've got chemtrails. That's the conspiracy theory about planes spraying toxic chemicals. Then you have geoengineering. That's the massive theoretical idea of altering the entire global climate. What Rainmaker does is the third thing: cloud seeding. It's a localized, science-based technique to convince clouds that already exist to drop more rain. And believe it or not, the tech has been around since the 1940s.
All right, so we know the what. Now let's talk about the who. If this isn't some shadowy government agency pulling the strings, then who is the person actually trying to make it rain on demand? Well, the answer is probably not who you're picturing. This is Augustus Doricko. He's 25 years old, a UC Berkeley dropout, and a Thiel Fellow. That's a grant from the billionaire investor Peter Thiel. He is the face of a venture-backed moonshot bet to turn weather control into a commercial business. And just listen to his pitch. To understand the scale of this thing, this is what he's telling investors. It's not about helping a few farms get a little more water. He's talking about terraforming the planet. I mean, this is exactly the kind of audacious, change-the-world ambition that gets moonshot investors to open their checkbooks. It's an incredible pitch, right? But how does it actually work? How do you take a science from the 1940s and turn it into a high-tech 21st century startup? Let's break down the mechanics of how you actually make it rain. Here is the number that explains Rainmaker's entire business model: 93%. According to researchers, that's how much of the water floating in the clouds over the United States never falls as rain or snow. It just evaporates or drifts away. Rainmaker looks at that and sees a massive, wasted resource just hanging out in the sky, waiting to be used. And like I said, the core idea is old. It was invented back in 1946. It was even used by the military in Vietnam. But the real game changer, that's super recent. In 2017, a study called the Snowy Project used modern radar to prove, for the very first time, that you could scientifically measure the man-made rain. And that breakthrough is what made a company like Rainmaker even possible.
So here's the playbook. First, their high-res radar scans the sky like a treasure map, looking for the perfect clouds filled with that super-cooled water. Then, they launch autonomous drones that fly right into those clouds. Once inside, they release a super-fine mist of silver iodide. Think of it like a seed for a raindrop. It gives the water something to grab onto. And here's the kicker. That same radar then tracks the results, so they can actually measure and say, yep, we created exactly that much extra rain.
But when you're dealing with this kind of power, even on a local level, you're going to get an immense amount of scrutiny. And in the summer of 2024, Rainmaker's tech collided head-on with a real-world tragedy, and it put the company right in the middle of a national firestorm.
That July, absolutely catastrophic floods ripped through the Texas Hill Country. It was a historic disaster. And tragically, at least 120 people were killed, leaving communities just shattered and desperate for answers.
And then it came out that Rainmaker had been conducting operations in Texas. The internet, as you can imagine, just erupted. People started drawing a straight line from the company's work to the flood. The accusation was simple and it was damning. Rainmaker did this. They caused the storm that killed all those people. The company immediately went on the defensive, basically arguing that the accusations were physically impossible. They said, look, we weren't even flying during the storm system. Our flights were 150 miles away from the worst of the flooding. And, as required by state law, they had proactively shut down all operations the second they saw a flood risk.
But the real core of their defense was just simple math. A really successful cloud seeding operation might produce tens of millions of gallons of water. Okay, sounds like a lot. But the tropical storm that caused the flood? It dumped an estimated 3 to 4 trillion gallons of water. They argued the scale isn't even in the same universe. It's like blaming a squirt gun for a tsunami.
So after navigating that controversy, Rainmaker is pushing forward with its grand vision. Because for Doricko and his investors, this was never just about making a little extra rain. It's about completely rewriting the rules of how we interact with our own planet.
Doricko actually traces his whole ambition back to a video game he loved as a kid called Spore. And he said the one part of the game he was obsessed with was terraforming, taking dead, uninhabitable planets and engineering them to support life. And now, he's trying to do that same thing, but in the real world.
This whole idea fits into a theoretical framework called the Kardashev scale, which is this really cool way of ranking how advanced a civilization is. A Type 1 civilization is one that has achieved mastery over all the energy sources of its home planet. That includes solar, geothermal, and total control over the weather.
So this is the true scope of the bet. This is the whole shebang. It starts with ending droughts for farmers, for sure. But the full roadmap, it's about trying to mitigate hurricanes, turn deserts into green, livable land, and ultimately build a technology that could help elevate humanity to a Type 1 civilization. This has to be one of the most ambitious bets in all of modern technology.
Ultimately, what this all means is that this technology is no longer science fiction. The ability to engineer the weather, even on a small scale, is here. And that reality raises these enormous questions about ethics and control and unintended consequences. So as we stand in this new frontier, we're left with one really profound question. We can do it, but who gets to play God?